Marcus Ashford built an $8 billion empire by trusting his instincts. He fired people for questioning him. He destroyed careers for speaking up. So when a 27-year-old intern tried to warn him about a $3 billion fraud, he did what he always did. He threw her out of his office. That decision would cost him everything. This is the true story of how the quietest person in the room became the most powerful. And where in the world are you watching from today? Drop your comment below. Zara Chun arrived at Titanium Ventures at 5 in the morning. She did this every day. The office was empty at that hour. Just her, the hum of computers, and the Manhattan skyline turning from black to gray outside the windows. She'd been doing this for 3 months now. 3 months of arriving before anyone else and leaving after everyone went home. 3 months of being invisible. Her desk sat in the corner. The other employees called it the penalty box. It's where they put interns and people who'd messed up. Zara earned her spot there on day one when she spilt coffee near Marcus Ashford's shoes. Not on them, near them, but that was enough. Marcus Ashford owned Titanium Ventures. He turned $50 million into $8 billion in 12 years. Every financial magazine had written about him. Every business school studied his methods. He was a legend on Wall Street. He was also the most terrifying person Zara had ever met. Move faster. His voice cut across the trading floor that morning. If I wanted excuses, I'd hire my ex-wife's lawyers. 20 people went silent. Keyboards clicked nervously. Nobody looked up. That's how it worked at Titanium Ventures. You kept your head down. You did your work. You didn't attract Marcus's attention unless you wanted to get destroyed. Zara had learned this lesson well. For 3 months, she'd been a ghost. She organized his travel receipts. She prepared meeting agendas. She made sure his coffee was exactly 160 degrees. She existed to make his life easier, and in return, he forgot she existed. She'd gone to Yale for college, Stanford for her MBA. She had $200,000 in student loans and a dream of making it on Wall Street. This internship was supposed to be her big break. 6 months at Titanium Ventures, then a full-time position, then climbing the ladder to success. Instead, she was invisible. But Zara had been using those early mornings for something else. Something Marcus didn't know about. She'd been studying the Jakarta project. The Jakarta infrastructure deal was Marcus's latest big move. $3.2 billion to build toll roads and ports across Indonesia. It was supposed to prove he wasn't just a trader. He could build real things, create real value. Except something about the project bothered Zara. Her grandmother had immigrated from China to Jakarta in the 1960s. She'd built a textile business there before moving the family to San Francisco. Zara spent childhood summers in Jakarta. She spoke Bahasa Indonesia. She understood how business really worked there. And the Jakarta project numbers looked too perfect. Construction costs matched projections exactly. Timelines were aggressive but achievable. Regulatory approvals went through without problems. Everything aligned perfectly, too perfectly. So Zara started digging. Not because anyone asked her to, not because it was her job, but because something felt wrong. She spent her own money buying permits from a local journalist. She called old classmates in Jakarta asking about the contractors. She cross-referenced company names against Indonesian business registries late at night when everyone else had gone home. What she found made her stomach drop. 3 of the 5 subcontractors didn't actually exist. They were shell companies, fake businesses registered to empty lots and residential addresses. The permits were real, but they'd been obtained through a man who'd been arrested for bribery. And the construction costs? They were inflated by at least 40%. Someone was stealing from Marcus Ashford. Stealing millions, maybe hundreds of millions. The worst part? It was his Indonesian partner doing it. A man named Budi Hartono, a politically connected businessman who'd been featured in Forbes Asia. He was using Marcus's money to get rich while delivering almost nothing. Zara documented everything. Every shell company, every fake invoice, every inflated cost. She put it all in a folder with tabs and highlights and sources. She also found a solution. a legitimate Indonesian contractor who could take over the project, a law firm that specialized in fraud recovery, a way to save most of the investment if they moved quickly. The board review was in 2 weeks. When Marcus and his investors flew to Jakarta to inspect the progress, they'd discover the truth. And when they did, it wouldn't just kill the Jakarta project. It would destroy Marcus's reputation. It might even bankrupt the company. Zara had the proof. She had the solution. She just needed someone to listen. Chan! Marcus's voice exploded across the floor. My office. Now. Every head turned. Zara's heart jumped into her throat. She grabbed her folder and stood up. Her hands were shaking. The walk to his office felt like a death march. Through the glass walls, she could see Manhattan spread out below. Marcus sat behind a desk made of Indonesian rosewood that cost more than a car. His silver hair was perfect. His suit was perfect. Everything about him screamed power. Close the door, he said without looking up from his phone. Zara obeyed. This was it. Her chance to tell him. Her chance to save everything. She just had to make him listen. Marcus Ashford still hadn't looked at her. He kept scrolling through his phone, his thumb moving with practiced efficiency. Zara stood there holding her folder, waiting. Finally, he set the phone down. His blue eyes met hers. Cold, calculating, empty of curiosity. I'm reassigning you, he said. No greeting, no small talk, just the decision. You'll be working on the Jakarta infrastructure project. Data entry, grunt work. Maybe you'll learn something about how real business operates. Zara's stomach dropped. Jakarta, the project she'd been investigating. The disaster waiting to happen. Sir, I actually wanted to discuss Jakarta. Did I ask for your input? His voice didn't rise, but it cut like a knife. You're an intern. You've been here 90 days. I've been building empires since before you were born. I understand that, but I've been reviewing the contracts, and there's something you need to see. Get out of my office. The words hit like a physical slap. Zara felt her face go hot. Through the glass walls, she could see other employees pretending not to watch. Sir, please, if you just look at what I found. Get my office. Each word came louder, sharper. Other people were definitely watching now. Zara felt herself shrinking, but she tried one more time. There's fraud in the Jakarta project. Systematic fraud. Your partner Budi Hartono is stealing. Before I have security escort you out of the building entirely. Marcus stood up now, his full height making her feel small. You think you can walk in here after 3 months of making coffee and filing papers and tell me how to run my company? Do you have any idea who I am? The question hung in the air. Of course she knew who he was. Everyone knew who Marcus Ashford was. That was the whole point. He was the genius, the legend, the man who saw the 2008 crash coming and made $1 billion. I need people who execute, not question, Marcus continued. His voice dropped to something more dangerous than shouting. You want to make suggestions? Earn it. Prove you can handle the basics first. Now get out before I decide your internship ends today. Zara left. Her folder felt heavy against her chest. Behind her, Marcus was already on his phone. She'd already ceased to exist in his world. The walk back to her desk felt endless. Nobody made eye contact. Priya, the only person who'd been friendly to her, gave her a sympathetic look but said nothing. Zara sat down. Her hands were still shaking. 3 months of work. Hundreds of hours of investigation. Proof of fraud that could bankrupt the company. And he wouldn't even open the folder. She looked at the manila folder in her lap. Inside was everything. Shell company registrations. Fake invoices. Photos of empty construction sites. The names of legitimate contractors who could fix it. A complete roadmap to save $3 billion. But Marcus Ashford didn't want to hear it from an intern who'd spilled coffee near his shoes 3 months ago. Zara opened her desk drawer and put the folder inside. Her student loans were crushing her. This internship was supposed to be her future. If she pushed harder, she'd get fired. If she stayed quiet, the company might collapse anyway. She stared at her computer screen. at the reflection of the trading floor behind her, at the glass office where Marcus was laughing on his phone, having already forgotten she existed. Her grandmother's voice came back to her, something she used to say in Mandarin, "Do the right thing, then sleep well." Zara pulled the folder back out of her drawer. She looked at the calendar on her wall. The investor meeting was in 2 weeks. The board review where pension funds and sovereign wealth funds would evaluate the Jakarta project, where they'd commit even more money to a fraud they didn't know existed. 2 weeks. She could stay quiet, keep her head down, hope someone else noticed the problems. Or she could do something that would probably destroy her career but might save billions of dollars and dozens of innocent investors. Zara took out her phone. She pulled up the contact information for David Chun, the representative from California Teachers Pension Fund. He'd be at the investor meeting. So would representatives from Abu Dhabi Investment Authority, from the MacArthur Family Office, from 3 other major funds. They deserved to know the truth, even if telling them meant Marcus would make sure she never worked in finance again. Her finger hovered over the keyboard. One email, one decision, one moment that would change everything. Zara started typing. 2 months earlier, Zara almost hadn't noticed it. She'd been organizing files for the Jakarta project, basic intern work, scanning documents, creating folders, making sure everything was properly labeled. Her mind was barely engaged. She was thinking about her student loans, about how much coffee she'd need to make it through another 16-hour day. Then she saw the invoice. Sentosa Infrastructure Group, primary contractor, payment, $42 million for preliminary port construction. The amount seemed high, but she didn't know enough about Indonesian construction costs to be sure. She kept filing, but something nagged at her. That night, after everyone left, she pulled the invoice back up. She Googled Sentosa Infrastructure Group. They had a website. It looked professional. They listed major projects across Southeast Asia. Everything seemed legitimate. But Zara had grown up hearing her grandmother's stories about Jakarta, about how business worked there, about the difference between what companies claimed and what they actually did. She called her cousin Kevin in Jakarta. He worked in real estate development. "Hey, random question," she said. "Have you heard of Sentosa Infrastructure Group?" "Sure. They're legit. Big company." "Why? What about their subcontractors? Do you know anything about PT Wayana Construksi?" Silence on the other end. "Where'd you hear that name?" "It's listed as a subcontractor on a project." "Why?" "Zara, I don't know what you're working on, but be careful. PT Wayana has a reputation. Nothing you can prove, but people talk. Money goes in, not much comes out." She thanked him and hung up. Then she spent $200 she couldn't afford to pay a journalist in Jakarta for copies of public construction permits. When they arrived by email 3 days later, her suspicions got worse. PT Wayana Construksi was registered to a residential address in South Jakarta. Not an office, not a construction yard, someone's house. Zara started digging deeper. She used her lunch breaks to search Indonesian business registries. She stayed late cross-referencing contractor names against actual construction projects. She called old classmates from her MBA program who'd taken jobs in Southeast Asia. The pattern became clear. Of the 5 subcontractors listed on the Jakarta project, 3 didn't actually exist as functioning companies. They had registration papers. They had bank accounts, but they had no employees, no equipment, no history of completed projects. They were shells, fake companies designed to receive money and funnel it somewhere else. She found the fake permits next. They'd been obtained through a man named Darmawan Kusuma, a fixer who specialized in getting approvals through the Indonesian bureaucracy. 6 months ago, he'd been arrested for bribery in a completely different case. His name was in the Jakarta newspapers. The same man had gotten permits for Marcus's project. Then Zara found the inflated invoices. She spent a week comparing the Jakarta project costs to similar infrastructure projects across Indonesia. Port construction, road building, regulatory compliance. She built spreadsheets. She calculated averages. She factored in regional differences. The Jakarta project costs were 40% higher than they should be. 40% of $3.2 billion was over $1 billion in excess charges. Someone was stealing that money, and she knew who. Budi Hartono, Marcus's Indonesian partner. The politically connected businessman with the Forbes profile and the expensive suits. He was the common thread. His signature was on every suspicious contract. His companies were connected to every shell operation. He was using Marcus Ashford's money to make himself rich while delivering a fraction of the actual work. The worst part? The board review was coming. In 2 weeks, Marcus and his investors would fly to Jakarta to inspect the progress. They'd expect to see roads, ports, construction sites buzzing with activity. Instead, they'd find empty fields, a few token excavators, maybe some foundation work. Nothing close to what 300 million in disbursed funds should have produced. When that happened, it wouldn't just embarrass Marcus. It would trigger fraud investigations, lawsuits, criminal charges. The fund had borrowed money against its other investments to finance Jakarta. If the project collapsed, it could take down the entire company. Hundreds of jobs, billions in pension funds, all gone because Marcus trusted the wrong partner and refused to look closely at the details. But Zara had also found something else, something that could save it. A legitimate contractor, PT Jaya Construksi. She'd vetted them personally, called their previous clients, verified their equipment, checked their financial statements. They were real, they were capable, and they were willing to take over the project at actual cost if Titanium Ventures moved quickly. She'd also found a law firm in Jakarta that specialized in fraud recovery. They knew how to exit bad partnerships, how to recover stolen funds, how to minimize the penalty clauses that could cost hundreds of millions. She had the evidence. She had the solution. She just needed someone to listen. The coffee shop on 47th Street was half empty when Zara arrived. Priya Ramachandran was already there, stirring her matcha latte with more force than necessary. "He actually said that?" Priya asked after Zara finished explaining. "Get out of my office?" Word for word. Zara stared at her untouched espresso. "I tried 3 times to explain." Priya shook her head. "He's always like that. Last year, he fired a VP for suggesting they needed better risk models. The guy had a PhD from MIT. Marcus called him an overeducated coward in front of everyone. But this is different." Zara leaned forward. "Jakarta isn't just risky. It's fraud. Active, ongoing fraud. And he's walking into a disaster in 2 weeks. Have you tried showing anyone else? His CFO, maybe? Or who?" Zara's laugh was bitter. "His executives worship him. Nobody questions Marcus Ashford. He's the genius who predicted the 2008 crash, who made $1 billion shorting mortgage bonds. Why would they listen to an intern he doesn't even remember the name of?" Priya was quiet for a moment. "So what are you going to do?" That was the question. Zara had spent 3 sleepless nights thinking about it. She'd built spreadsheets of her student loan payments, calculated how long she could survive unemployed, researched what it meant to be blacklisted in finance. Every calculation said the same thing. Stay quiet, keep your head down, protect your future. But her grandmother's voice kept coming back. "Do the right thing, then sleep well." "The investor meeting is Thursday," Zara said slowly. 2 p.m. The main conference room. "The consortium review? I'm helping set that up." "Why?" "I need to get my report to the investors. Not Marcus. Not his executives. The people putting up $2.4 billion. They deserve to know what they're really funding." Priya's eyes went wide. "Zara, if you go around Marcus like that, you're done. Not just fired. He'll make sure you never work again. He has that power." "I know. Then why would you?" "Because it's the right thing to do." Zara pulled out her folder. 3 months of work. Proof of fraud. A solution that could save billions. Pension funds are invested in this. Teachers' retirement money. Police officers. Firefighters. Regular people who trust their money to professionals who are supposed to be smart enough to see fraud. "And you think they'll listen to you?" "I think they'll listen to evidence. I'm going to write a report. 15 pages. Every fact documented. Every claim sourced. Photos. Financial records. The whole thing. I'll translate sections into Mandarin and Arabic for the international investors. Priya whistled softly. When? I'll work on it this week. Finish by Wednesday night. And then what? How do you get it to them without Marcus intercepting it? Zara had thought about this too. I'm supposed to set up the catering for the meeting, right? Make sure the coffee is hot and the pastries are fresh. Yeah. I'll arrive early Thursday morning. Really early. I'll place one copy of the report at each investor's seat, under their meeting agenda where they won't see it until they sit down. That's... Priya searched for the word. Insane. Brilliant. But mostly insane. Probably. Marcus will lose his mind when he sees what you've done. I know. You'll be fired immediately. I know that too. Priya studied her friend's face. You're really going to do this? It wasn't a question. Zara nodded. I can't watch this company collapse when I know how to stop it. I can't watch innocent people lose their retirement money because Marcus is too arrogant to listen. And I can't spend the rest of my life knowing I had the truth and stayed silent to protect my own career. What about your student loans? Your future? I'll figure it out. Maybe I'll go back to Jakarta. Help my uncle with his business. There are worse things than starting over. Priya was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and squeezed Zara's hand. If you do this, you're going to need help. The catering setup requires 2 people. I'll come in early with you Thursday. Priya, you don't have to risk. Yes, I do. Because you're right. This is bigger than our careers. And if Marcus fires us both, at least we'll know we did the right thing. Zara felt tears prick her eyes. For 3 months, she'd been invisible. Alone. Working in silence while everyone ignored her. Now finally someone saw her. Someone believed her. Thank you, she whispered. Priya smiled. Thank me after we survive Thursday. Now let's talk about this report. You're going to need help making it bulletproof. If we're burning our careers to the ground, we might as well make it count. They ordered more coffee and got to work. Outside, Manhattan moved at its usual frantic pace. Deals being made. Fortunes won and lost. Careers built and destroyed. In 2 weeks, Zara Chen would either be unemployed and blacklisted, or she'd be the person who saved billions of dollars and exposed one of the biggest frauds in hedge fund history. There was no middle ground anymore. She'd made her choice. Thursday morning, 4:30 a.m. The lobby of Titanium Ventures was dark and empty. Zara's hands shook as she swiped her keycard. The elevator ride to the 73rd floor felt like ascending to her own execution. Priya stood beside her, holding a box of printed reports. Last chance to back out, Priya whispered. No backing out now. The elevator doors opened. The trading floor was silent. Computer screens glowed in the darkness. Outside the windows, Manhattan was just starting to wake up. They moved quickly. Zara had the conference room key from setting up previous meetings. Inside, the long table was already set with leather portfolios for each investor. Name cards marked their seats. David Chen, California Teachers Pension Fund. Amira Al-Rashid, Abu Dhabi Investment Authority. James MacArthur, MacArthur Family Office. 5 others. 8 investors total. $2.4 billion in committed capital. Under the agendas, Zara said. So they don't see them until they sit down. They worked fast. Each report was pristine. 15 pages. Executive summary on top. Financial evidence. Photos of empty construction sites where millions in work should have been completed. Contact information for the legitimate contractor who could save the project. At each investor's seat, Zara placed the report directly under the meeting agenda, invisible until they pulled the agenda out to take notes. Done, Priya said. We should go before. Footsteps in the hallway. Both women froze. A security guard walked past, barely glancing through the glass wall. He didn't stop. Didn't question why 2 employees were in the office at 5 a.m. At Titanium Ventures, early hours were normal, expected, rewarded. They finished the catering setup. fresh coffee, pastries from the expensive bakery Marcus preferred. Everything perfect. By 6 a.m. they were done. The reports were planted. The evidence was in place. Now they just had to wait. The hours crawled by. Zara couldn't focus on work. She kept watching the clock. 9 a.m., 10 a.m., noon. Every minute felt like an hour. At 1:45 p.m., the investors started arriving. She watched them from her desk as they checked in at reception. Confident men and women in expensive suits. People who controlled billions. People who could destroy Marcus with a single phone call. Or save him if they chose to. At 1:58 p.m., Marcus arrived. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost $10,000. His Patek Philippe watch caught the light. He looked like money made flesh. Powerful. Untouchable. Certain. He had no idea what was waiting for him. The investors filed into the conference room. Casual conversation. Handshakes. Coffee being poured. Marcus at the head of the table, relaxed and commanding. Then they sat down, pulled out their agendas, found the reports. Zara couldn't hear what was being said, but she could see it through the glass walls. Confusion spreading across faces. Papers being lifted. Heads turning to look at neighbors. The rustle of pages as they started reading. Marcus glanced at his copy. His face went dark red. She saw his mouth form the words. "What is this?" David Chun was already reading, his finger tracing down the executive summary. His expression shifted from confusion to concern to something close to alarm. Amira had the photos out. Empty fields where construction was supposed to be happening. A single excavator where a port should be taking shape. James MacArthur was reading the financial section, his lawyer's eyes scanning for key facts. Marcus stood up. "This is nothing. A disgruntled employee trying to make trouble. We should." But David was reading aloud now. Zara couldn't hear the exact words, but she saw Marcus's face go from red to pale. Amira held up one of the photos, pointed at something, asked a question. Marcus tried to answer, tried to control the room the way he always did. With confidence, with authority, with the weight of his reputation. But the investors weren't looking at him anymore. They were looking at the reports, at the evidence, at the documentation of shell companies and fake invoices and construction that didn't exist. Someone pulled out a phone, then another. Lawyers being called, accountants, investigators. The meeting that was supposed to last 1 hour stretched past 2 hours. Past 3. Zara watched Marcus try to regain control and fail. Watched him make calls to Jakarta that clearly didn't go well. Watched his perfect composure crack and crumble. At 5:30 p.m., people started emerging from the conference room. They looked shaken, angry, worried. Marcus came out last. His suit was wrinkled now. His perfect hair was messed up from running his hands through it. His eyes swept the trading floor and locked on Zara. The look he gave her could have melted steel. He walked straight toward her desk. Every person in the office went silent, watching, waiting. "You," Marcus said, his voice quiet and deadly. "My office. Now." Zara stood up. Her legs felt weak, but she walked steadily. This was it. The moment where everything changed. She'd thrown the grenade into the room. Now she had to face the explosion. Marcus's office felt smaller this time. Or maybe he felt smaller. His face had gone from red to white to something close to gray. "Sit down," he said. Zara remained standing. "I'd rather not." I said sit down. "And I'd rather stand for this conversation." Something flickered in Marcus's eyes. Surprise, maybe. Nobody talked to him like this. Nobody refused his direct orders. "You're done," he said. "Not just here. Everywhere. I will personally ensure you never work in this industry again. Do you understand me? You went behind my back. Humiliated me in front of my investors. Violated confidentiality agreements. I saved your company," Zara interrupted. The words hung in the air. Marcus stared at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. "What did you say?" "I saved your company. The forensic team you just sent to Jakarta? They're going to confirm everything in my report." Budi Hartono has been stealing from you for 6 months. Shell companies, fake invoices, construction that doesn't exist. You were being robbed blind, and you were too arrogant to hear it from someone you considered beneath you. Marcus's jaw clenched. Get out. I'm already leaving, but you should know something else. Zara's voice stayed steady, calm. I sent copies of that report to the SEC and the FBI 2 days ago. The color drained completely from Marcus's face. You did what? The Securities and Exchange Commission, the Federal Bureau of Investigation White-Collar Crimes Unit. Because if I'm right about the fraud, they need to know. And if I'm wrong, they'll clear you. Either way, the truth comes out. You contacted federal investigators about my company? About fraud being committed against your company. There's a difference. Marcus moved around his desk. For a moment, Zara thought he might actually put his hands on her. But he stopped a few feet away, trembling with rage. My grandfather used to say something, Zara continued. Do the right thing, then sleep well. I'll sleep fine tonight, Mr. Ashford. Will you? She turned and walked out. Didn't run. Didn't hurry. Just walked with her head up and her shoulders back. Behind her, she heard something crash. Maybe he threw his phone. Maybe he punched his desk. She didn't turn around to look. At her desk, Priya was waiting. How bad? I'm fired. Probably blacklisted. Definitely unemployed. Was it worth it? Zara thought about the teachers whose pension money was at risk. The firefighters. The regular people who'd trusted their retirement to professionals who were supposed to be smart enough to see fraud. Yeah, she said. It was worth it. She packed her things. Coffee mug. A framed photo of her grandmother. A notepad. Everything fit in her purse. 3 months of her life reduced to a few personal items. As she walked to the elevator, something unexpected happened. David Chun emerged from the conference room. He walked straight to her. Ms. Chun, could you wait a moment? She stopped. Behind David, the other investors were filing out. They all looked at her with expressions she couldn't quite read. I need to make a phone call, David said, but I'd like to speak with you before you leave. Would you wait in the small conference room? Just for a few minutes. Zara glanced at Priya, who looked equally confused. Okay. The small conference room had a view of the city. Zara sat down and waited. Through the glass wall, she could see Marcus in his office, pacing like a caged animal. His perfect world was collapsing, and he had nobody to blame but himself. 10 minutes later, David returned. Amira and James came with him. We need to ask you something, David said, sitting down across from her. This report, the investigation you did, how long did it take you? About 3 months. Most of it at night and on weekends. And you're 27 years old? 3 months into your first position at this company. Yes. The 3 investors exchanged glances. Some kind of silent communication Zara couldn't interpret. Here's our situation, Amira said. Her accent was crisp, her tone businesslike. We just discovered that we've committed $2.4 billion to a project that's being systematically defrauded. Marcus Ashford, who we trusted to manage this investment, either didn't notice or didn't care to look closely. But you noticed, James added. You investigated, you documented, and you found a solution. This contractor you mentioned, PT Jaya Construksi. You vetted them personally. I called their previous clients, verified their equipment and financial statements, checked their reputation with local officials. They're legitimate. And the law firm? The one that handles fraud recovery. They've successfully recovered assets in 3 similar cases. They know how to exit bad partnerships and minimize penalty clauses. David leaned forward. Ms. Chun, we're taking operational control of this project. Marcus will retain his ownership stake, but he won't be managing the Jakarta investment anymore. We need someone who actually understands the situation. Someone who speaks the language. Someone the Indonesian authorities will trust to clean up this mess. Zara's heart started pounding. What are you saying? We're offering you a job. Project director for the Jakarta salvage operation. $400,000 base salary. Performance bonuses if we recover value. Equity stake in the restructured project. The room spun. For $100,000? She made $38,000 as an intern. I'm 27, she said. I don't have experience managing. You have the experience that matters, Amira interrupted. You saw what everyone else missed. You cared enough to investigate. You had the courage to speak up even when it meant destroying your career. That's exactly who we need. What about Marcus? What about him? David's expression was neutral. He's not your boss anymore. He's barely his own boss at this point. Zara thought about her student loans, about her grandmother who'd built a business with nothing but determination, about 3 months of being invisible while having all the right answers. I have conditions, she said. James smiled slightly. Of course you do. Full operational authority. I report directly to the consortium board, not through Marcus's team. And I want to bring in my own people, starting with Priya Ramachandran from risk management. The 3 investors looked at each other again. Then David extended his hand. Done. Can you start Monday? Zara shook his hand. I'll be here at 8. The forensic team landed in Jakarta 72 hours after the investor meeting. What they found was worse than Zara's report had suggested. Budi Hartono had been stealing for 8 months, not 6. The shell companies numbered 7, not 3. And the amount missing wasn't hundreds of millions. It was $890 million. Nearly $1 billion. Funneled through fake companies, phantom invoices, and construction projects that existed only on paper. The team found registrations for equipment that was never purchased, permits for work that was never started, contracts with workers who didn't exist. The Port of Tanjung site, where $30 million in construction was supposed to be underway, was an empty field with a single rusted excavator. The toll road from Jakarta to Bandung, budgeted at $120 million, had exactly 4 miles of graded dirt and nothing else. Budi Hartono disappeared on the second day of the investigation. His phone went dead. His office was cleared out. His family claimed they hadn't seen him in weeks. 2 days later, authorities located him in Singapore. But Singapore's extradition treaties were complicated, and Hartono had apparently been moving money there for months. He'd planned his exit carefully. The business press discovered the story on Monday morning. By Monday afternoon, it was everywhere. The Wall Street Journal, hedge fund genius loses billions to elementary fraud. Bloomberg, how did everyone miss this except the intern? Financial Times, Ashford's Jakarta disaster. Inside the fraud that fooled Wall Street. The articles were brutal. They detailed how Marcus Ashford, legendary for predicting the 2008 crash, had walked straight into a fraud scheme that any competent due diligence should have caught. How he'd dismissed warnings. How he'd trusted reputation over research. How an intern working at night had seen what his entire executive team had missed. By Wednesday, Titanium Ventures' other investors were panicking. If Marcus had missed fraud this obvious in Jakarta, what else had he missed? What other investments were built on sand instead of stone? 3 pension funds withdrew from other titanium projects. 2 sovereign wealth funds demanded full audits of every international investment. The MacArthur family office quietly started moving assets to other managers. Marcus tried to control the damage. He gave interviews claiming the fraud was sophisticated and unavoidable. He blamed Indonesian corruption and weak regulatory oversight. He promised his team was already fixing the problems. But nobody was listening anymore. His reputation, built on decades of success, collapsed in less than a week. Because reputation based on arrogance is fragile. One major mistake and the whole structure falls apart. On Friday, exactly 1 week after Zara's report landed on the investors' desks, the consortium board held an emergency meeting. Marcus wasn't invited. They voted unanimously to remove him as managing partner of the Jakarta project and all related international investments. He would keep his ownership stake. He would still collect dividends if the projects became profitable. But he would have no operational authority, no decision-making power, no control. David Chin delivered the news personally. Marcus's secretary said he threw them out of his office. Then he locked the door and didn't emerge for 3 hours. When he finally came out, he looked like he'd aged 10 years. The legendary Marcus Ashford, the genius who'd built an $8 billion empire, had been reduced to a silent partner in his own company. All because he'd been too arrogant to listen to someone he considered beneath him. Zara heard about it from Priya, who'd heard from someone in accounting. They were sitting in Zara's new office. Not the penalty box anymore. A real office with a door and a window and a view of the city. "How do you feel about it?" Priya asked. Zara thought about that. She'd spent 3 months being invisible, being dismissed, being treated like she didn't matter. Part of her wanted to feel triumphant, vindicated, satisfied that Marcus was finally facing consequences. But mostly she just felt tired. "I feel like $1 billion got stolen because someone was too proud to admit an intern might know something he didn't," she said. "Teachers and firefighters lost money because of his ego. That's not something to celebrate. But you saved most of it. The consortium thinks they can recover 60% of the project's value with your plan. 60% means 40% is still gone. That's almost $1 billion that regular people will never see again." Priya was quiet for a moment. "You did the right thing. You know that, right?" "I know. Doesn't make it feel good, though." Her phone buzzed. An email from the Jakarta law firm. They'd successfully frozen 3 of Hartono's shell company accounts in Singapore. $340 million recovered. Not everything, but something. "See?" Priya pointed at the screen. "You're already making a difference." Zara allowed herself a small smile. "We're making a difference. I couldn't do this without you." "So what's next?" "Next we fly to Jakarta. Meet with the legitimate contractor. Start rebuilding what Hartono destroyed. Turn this disaster into something real." Outside her window, Manhattan gleamed in the afternoon sun. Somewhere in the city, Marcus Ashford was probably drinking expensive scotch and blaming everyone but himself. But the city didn't belong to him anymore. Not entirely. It belonged to people who did the work, who saw the truth, who spoke up even when silence was safer. People like Zara Chin. Jakarta in August was brutal. The heat hit Zara like a wall the moment she stepped off the plane. 95 degrees, 90% humidity, the kind of weather that made your shirt stick to your back before you reached the taxi. She'd be spending a lot of time here over the next year. The salvage operation was complex. They had to navigate Indonesian courts to exit the Hartono partnership without triggering penalty clauses worth hundreds of millions. They had to rebuild relationships with local officials who felt betrayed by the fraud. They had to hire a legitimate contractor and restart construction that was months behind schedule. And they had to do all of it while recovering as much stolen money as possible. Zara set up operations in a Jakarta hotel conference room. Priya joined her 2 weeks later. Together, they built a team: Indonesian lawyers, forensic accountants, a local project manager who actually knew how to build ports and roads. The first month was just damage control, meeting with officials, explaining what had happened, proving that the new management was legitimate and serious about actually completing the work. The second month, they started recovering money. The law firm tracked Hartono's shell companies through Singapore, Hong Kong, and the Cayman Islands. They found accounts he'd missed closing, wire transfers he'd thought were hidden, assets he'd registered under family members' names. By month 3, they'd recovered $340 million. Not everything, but enough to prove the project wasn't dead. The legitimate contractor, PT Jaya Construksi, mobilized in month 4. Real equipment, real workers, real construction. Zara visited the port of Tanjung site and saw actual progress for the first time. Foundations being poured, steel being erected, the work that should have been happening for the past year. But nothing was easy. Indonesian bureaucracy moved slowly. Permits had to be reissued. Environmental studies had to be redone because Hartonos were fraudulent. Local communities needed reassurance that this project wouldn't disappear like the last one. Zara spent half her time in Jakarta, the other half on planes or in conference rooms explaining Indonesian business culture to American investors who thought contracts were all that mattered. Relationships are currency here, she told David Chun during one video call. You can't just issue orders and expect compliance. You have to build trust, show respect, understand that face saving is as important as the bottom line. Her grandmother's lessons paid off. The cultural knowledge she'd absorbed during childhood summers, the language skills, the understanding that business in Southeast Asia required patience and personal connection, not just financial leverage. Month 7 brought a crisis. A local politician tried to extort the project for kickbacks. Zara refused to pay. The politician threatened to revoke their permits. Instead of backing down, Zara went public. She held a press conference explaining the project's history, the fraud, the recovery, the commitment to doing things legitimately this time. Local newspapers ran the story. National television picked it up. The politician backed down within a week. Month 9, they hit another obstacle. Inflation in Indonesia had driven up construction costs. The budget was tight. They had to make cuts somewhere. Zara spent 3 weeks redesigning the project scope. Fewer toll roads, but higher quality. A smaller port, but more efficient. She brought in engineers to optimize every element. The investors approved the changes. Work continued. By month 12, progress was visible. 5 miles of completed toll road. The port of Tanjung foundation finished and vertical construction underway. Local workers employed. Tax revenue flowing to the Indonesian government. Zara testified in 3 court proceedings against members of Hartono's network. Each time, she presented evidence calmly and thoroughly. The Indonesian prosecutors told her she was the most prepared witness they'd worked with. 2 of Hartono's lieutenants were convicted. Hartono himself remained in Singapore, but his assets were frozen and his extradition was being negotiated. Month 14 brought the first completion. The Jakarta to Bandung toll road segment opened. Not the full route Hartono had promised, but 23 miles of actual functioning road. The ribbon-cutting ceremony happened on a hot Tuesday morning. The Indonesian transportation minister attended. Local officials, representatives from the communities along the route, and Zara standing in the back, watching the first cars drive on infrastructure that almost never existed. A Jakarta Post journalist interviewed her after the ceremony. How does it feel to save a project everyone thought was dead? It's not about saving the project, Zara said. It's about finishing what we promised. About proving that legitimate business can work in Indonesia. About showing that trust can be rebuilt after it's broken. The article ran the next day with a photo of her at the construction site. Bloomberg picked it up. Then the Financial Times. Then a half-dozen business publications across Asia and America. The intern who'd exposed the fraud was now the director who'd rebuilt it. Somewhere in Manhattan, Marcus Ashford probably saw those articles. Zara wondered what he thought. If he'd learned anything. If he regretted not opening that folder 14 months ago. But it didn't matter anymore. She wasn't building her career on his approval. She was building it on results. And the results spoke for themselves. 2 years after Marcus Ashford told her to get out of his office, Zara Chan sat in her Manhattan office reviewing contracts for a new port project in Vietnam. Her office was on the 68th floor of a different building. Better view than Titanium Ventures. Bigger desk. Her name on the door with a title that would have seemed impossible 26 months ago. Managing Director, Southeast Asia Operations. The consortium had created a new division after the Jakarta success. Infrastructure investments across Southeast Asia, with Zara running operations. She'd hired a team of 12 people, built relationships with contractors across 6 countries, established due diligence protocols that other firms were now copying. Her phone buzzed, an email notification. She almost ignored it, then saw the sender name, Marcus Ashford. She hadn't heard from him in 2 years. Not since the day she'd walked out of Titanium Ventures with her belongings in her purse and her career apparently in ruins. She opened the email. Zara, I hope this email finds you well. I understand you're now Managing Director of Southeast Asia Operations for the consortium. Congratulations on the Jakarta recovery. The work was impressive. I'm writing because I'm attempting to raise capital for a new infrastructure fund focused on Vietnam. Several investors have suggested I reach out to you as a potential advisor, given your experience in the region. Would you be willing to meet for coffee? Marcus. Zara read it 3 times. The tone was formal, professional, almost humble. This wasn't the Marcus who'd screamed at her to get out. This was someone who'd been humbled by losing half his empire. She could ignore it. She'd earned that right. Or she could respond with grace, but from a position of strength. Her grandmother's voice. When someone who wronged you asks for help, you have a choice. Be petty or be powerful. Power lasts longer. She typed her response. Marcus, thank you for reaching out. I'd be happy to meet and discuss your Vietnam fund. However, I should mention that I'm currently advising 3 other infrastructure funds in Southeast Asia. Before we meet, I'll need complete transparency on your fund structure, proposed investments, and local partners. I have strict policies about potential conflicts of interest. Also, I charge $5,000 per hour for consulting work, with a minimum commitment of 20 hours. If that works for you, my assistant can find a time next month. Best, Zara. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. $5,000 an hour. 2 years ago, she'd been making about $19 an hour as an intern. His response came 6 hours later. That works. I'll have my office reach out to yours. Zara smiled. Not triumphant, just quietly satisfied. She wasn't the same person who'd stood in his office clutching a folder nobody wanted to read. That person had been desperate for validation, desperate to be seen. This person didn't need Marcus Ashford's validation. She'd built her own credibility, earned her own respect, created her own opportunities. Her phone buzzed again. Priya, texting from Singapore, where she was now regional risk director. Did Marcus actually email you asking for help? He did. Are you going to advise him? Zara thought about it. Marcus had been wrong. Spectacularly, expensively wrong. But he'd lost half his company because of that mistake. That was its own punishment. And maybe he'd learned something. I'm going to evaluate his proposal fairly. Same as I would for anyone else. If it's solid, I'll advise. If it's not, I'll pass. Look at you being all professional and mature. Someone has to be. She set her phone down and returned to the Vietnam contract. The project was properly structured, properly vetted. Local partners she'd personally verified. Everything Hartono's Jakarta project should have been but wasn't. Through her window, Manhattan glittered in the evening light. Out there were thousands of people like who she'd been. Talented but overlooked. Dismissed because they hadn't proven themselves by someone else's standards. She'd been lucky. She'd had information that mattered at the right time. Investors who listened when it counted. But luck was only part of it. The real lesson was about doing the work even when nobody was watching. Pursuing truth even when it was dangerous. Speaking up even when it meant risking everything. Her email pinged. Another project proposal, this one from a development bank interested in African port infrastructure. They wanted her expertise, her guidance, her leadership. Zara opened the file and started reading. There was always more work to do, more projects to evaluate, more opportunities to build something real. The Jakarta toll road carried thousands of cars every day now. The port of Tanjung was operational. Real infrastructure serving real people. That mattered more than any title or salary. She'd proven that expertise didn't require permission from those who'd already succeeded. That competence could build its own foundation. That speaking truth to power sometimes meant becoming the power yourself. Get out of my office, Marcus had said. So she had. And she'd built something better outside it. That was the real victory. Not revenge. Not vindication. Just independence. The freedom to define success on her own terms. To build a career on merit instead of approval. Her assistant knocked on the door. Ms. Chan, your 7 o'clock is here. Zara closed her laptop. Another meeting. Another project. Another day building the career she'd almost lost by doing the right thing. She smiled and stood up. There was work to do. The coffee shop Marcus suggested was expensive. The kind of place where a latte cost $12 and the chairs were uncomfortable on purpose so people wouldn't stay too long. Zara arrived exactly on time. Marcus was already there, sitting in the back corner. He stood when he saw her, offered his hand. "Zara, thank you for meeting." She shook his hand. His grip was firm but not aggressive, different from the man who'd screamed at her 2 years ago. "Of course. You said you wanted to discuss Vietnam." They sat, ordered coffee, made small talk about the weather and the Jakarta project's continued success. Marcus asked intelligent questions about operating in Southeast Asia. He seemed genuinely interested in her answers. Finally, he got to the point. "I'm raising $200 million for infrastructure investments in Vietnam. Roads, ports, industrial parks. I've learned from Jakarta. I'm doing thorough due diligence this time. Multiple independent audits. Local partners vetted by at least 3 sources." "Who are your local partners?" Marcus pulled out a folder, passed it across the table. "Complete information, business registrations, financial statements, references from previous projects. Everything you asked for." Zara opened the folder, started reading. The documentation was thorough, detailed. Nothing like the thin files from Jakarta that should have raised red flags. "This is good work," she said after a few minutes. "Better than what most funds prepare. I hired a due diligence team, former FBI investigators who specialize in international fraud. I'm not taking chances anymore." Zara nodded, kept reading. The local partners looked legitimate. The project scope was realistic. The budget included proper contingencies. This was what Jakarta should have looked like from the beginning. "I'm also changing how I manage projects," Marcus continued. "Less centralized decision-making. More input from people on the ground. Regular audits. Independent oversight." "What changed?" Zara asked, looking up from the folder. Marcus was quiet for a moment. "You were right. That day in my office, I was too arrogant to listen, too convinced that my success meant I was always right." He paused. "Jakarta cost me half my company and my reputation. But it taught me something valuable. Smart people can be wrong. And sometimes the best information comes from unexpected sources. Like interns you've been ignoring for 3 months. Like interns I should have been listening to from day one." Marcus met her eyes. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. What I did was wrong. How I treated you was wrong. But I am asking for a chance to show I've learned from it." Zara studied him. The silver hair was thinner now. The confident posture was less rigid. He looked like a man who'd been humbled and was still figuring out how to rebuild. "If I advise on this project, I have conditions," she said. "Name them. Full transparency. Every document. Every decision. Every local meeting. If I ask a question, you answer it completely and honestly. No dismissing concerns because you think you know better." "Agreed." "Second condition. If I identify problems, you fix them immediately. No debate. No pushing back because it's inconvenient or expensive." "Agreed." "Third condition. You pay my rate. $100,000 for the minimum 20 hours. No special treatment. No discounts because we have history." Marcus nodded. "That's fair. You're worth every dollar." Zara closed the folder. "Then I'll review your proposal in detail and give you my assessment by the end of next week. If it checks out, I'll provide advisory services. If it doesn't, I'll tell you exactly why and walk away. That's all I ask." Marcus stood, offered his hand again. "Thank you, Zara, for giving me a chance. And for what you did 2 years ago. You saved a lot of people from losing a lot of money, including me, even if I was too stupid to see it at the time." She shook his hand. "People deserve second chances. Companies deserve honest leadership. Let's see if you can deliver both." After Marcus left, Zara sat with her coffee and watched the city move outside the window. Somewhere out there were thousands of young professionals trying to make it, working long hours, being overlooked, having the right answers but the wrong credentials. She'd been there. She knew what it felt like to be invisible, but she also knew the way out. Do the work, speak the truth, stand up even when it's dangerous. Build your competence so undeniably that credentials become irrelevant. Her phone buzzed. Another email. Another opportunity. Another project that needed someone who could see what others missed. Zara smiled, finished her coffee, and headed back to the office. There was always more work to do, more truth to speak, more opportunities to prove that expertise didn't require permission. Just competence, courage, and the willingness to risk everything for what's right. That was the lesson. Not revenge, not vindication, just the quiet satisfaction of building something real, something that mattered, something that would last long after the people who doubted you had moved on. She'd been the invisible intern once. Now she was the person invisible interns could aspire to become. And that was worth more than any revenge could ever be. Zara Chen's story proves something powerful. Your current position doesn't define your future impact. Being dismissed doesn't mean being wrong. And sometimes doing the right thing costs everything in the moment, but builds something better in the long run. What's the biggest risk you've ever taken to stand up for what's right? Have you ever been dismissed by someone who should have listened? Drop your story in the comments below. And if you want to hear more stories about people who went from invisible to unstoppable, share and hit that subscribe button. These are the stories they don't teach in business school, but they're the ones that change everything.